I should remember what. Yeah, I can do an intro if you want. Okay, come yes.
Summary.
Lovely.
It's annoying because it flips on the short side rather than the long side. Thank you, Benjamin.
It's all right. Doing very well, thank you. What's your name? Take a quick.
Seated is probably best actually.
So good evening, everybody. It's 7 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Could I just ask any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device to mute to avoid any feedback, please? And any remote participants, if you could please keep your camera and microphone off unless you wish to speak, as that can affect the quality of the meeting. This meeting is being live webcast and the recording stays on the council's website. We are using some new remote video conference equipment, which you can see the owl at the front. So for any speakers in the room to be picked up, if you want to be seen on camera, you'll need to come towards the front of the room, but it will be able to pick up the audio around the room. So it's up to you. If you want to be able to be seen clearly, then we've got this chair at the front for you to come to speak at, or as I said, it will pick up the audio around the room. So you can stay where you are for that. Okay. So welcome everyone to the first hybrid Western Area Committee meeting, and welcome to members and any members of the public that will be attending remotely. I can advise the following officers are in attendance from Swale Borough Council. We have Chief Executive Officer Larissa Reid, Policy and Engagement Officer Janet Dart. We have remotely Joe Millard, our Democratic Services Manager. And then also in attendance this evening, we have David Curry, who is our Kent Pond Warden, who's going to be speaking to us in a minute. We should have Rebecca O'Neill, but don't think she's quite here yet. So we're not sure whether she's coming in person or will be joining remotely. So we'll just have to wait for that one. And a big welcome to our parish council representatives. Could we just go around just so that we know, because not everyone obviously maybe knows who everyone is. So if we could just, for our parish councils, introduce ourselves and say where we're from, that'd be great.
Shall I start?
You can start over there.
I'm Graham Abbeycourt, Chairman of Hartley Parish Council.
Brian Clark, Chairman of Brick Parish Council.
Because I've been for Parish Council. Steve Thomas, Parish Council.
Thank you. And we also have remotely KCC Councillor Rich Lehman as well for our divisional Swale member for Swale. Could I just remind everyone, if you wish to speak at any point, if you could raise your hand and then I'll invite you to turn to speak. And if when you're speaking, if you could also just state your name and organisation, just so that we have that for those people that are listening remotely. And also obviously for the minutes. And likewise, anyone who's attending remotely, if you wish to speak, can you please make sure that you are muted up until that point? So keep your microphones on mute until that point. And then if you can indicate in the IM that you wish to speak, we'll be able to see that on the laptop in front of us, so we can call you to speak as well. Any members of the public that are using the IM in an inappropriate way may be removed from the meeting, just as a warning for that. Okay, so agenda item 1 is our emergency evacuation procedure. So just read out the following statement for the building. So please be aware of the evacuation procedure following the event of an emergency. There is no scheduled test of the fire alarm this evening during this evening's meeting. If the alarm does sound, please leave the building quickly without collecting any of your possessions, using the doors signed as fire escapes, and assemble where directed. Await instructions before re-entering the building. Should anyone require assistance on evacuating the building, please make the Swale Borough Council officers aware of any special needs so that suitable arrangements may be made in the event of an emergency. Is there anyone that would need any help with evacuation? No, all good. Okay, item 2, apologies for absence.
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Alan Horton. Councillor Monique Bonnet hopes to be here just a few minutes late. I haven't had apologies from Councillor Hampshire. Is anybody aware he's coming or not? And we've also heard from two parish councils who have sent apologies. That's Upchurch and Backchild.
Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 3, any declarations of interest, particular with reference to item 7, which will be obviously the funding allocations. Yeah, Councillor Baldock.
We have an expert in the parish.
Oh,
That's all, it's the plan, the regular parking.
oh. Sorry. Redgate Parish Council, welcome.
Not me.
No,
I'm just,
excellent. Lovely to see you here. Okay. So no declarations of interest. Okay. Okay, so agenda item 4 is the minutes from the previous meeting. So can I ask members to agree the minutes from the meeting held on the 9th of June 2020, minutes numbers 66 to 77 as a true record? Everyone in agreement? Thank you. Okay, so then item 5. So we have David Perry here, who's our Kent Pond Warden, to talk to us about pond maintenance within the Western area. I'll let Councillor Baldock introduce you a little bit further, because I think he was the one who, first of all, wanted to get you involved in this. So hand over to Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was keen that we look at our pond issues. We have a number of ponds across Wales, and historically there were even more. I just think that it's important that we have an awareness of their importance and look at what we can help do for their management. Some of them are less than desirable. Others have had improvements lately, so it's good.
Over to you, David.
Thank you very much. So my name is David Carey, and I'm chair of an organisation called the Kent Tree and Pond Partnership. And we actually run 2 volunteer schemes across Kent as a whole. Firstly, I would say Kent Tree Wardens, which is the largest scheme and is also run nationally by the Tree Council. But secondly, and equally importantly, even if smaller, is our network of Kent Pond Wardens. And there are about 30 pond wardens scattered across Kent, individuals in different parishes, and each of them has some knowledge of ponds, and more importantly, has gone through a training scheme, which was originally run by Southern Water, about maintaining ponds in the environment. I'm particularly glad to be invited to talk to a Swale committee because ponds are so important in this particular part of Kent. And as Councillor Baldock has said, water resources in this part of Kent have been under long-term pressure because of abstraction and usage issues since, I would say, big uptick in usage and potentially pollution as well since the 1930s. And you can see this all across the North Kent belt from Sittingbourne to Faversham. Faversham is a town I know rather better, and some of you may well be aware of a stream, the Westbrook stream, which goes down towards Stonebridge Pond in the middle of Faversham. Well, that actually used to arise fairly regularly before the 1930s. You could very easily find its source near Painters Forstall, and the stream used to run down a road called Water Lane, right through down to the middle of Faversham, basically every winter. As the chalk abstraction has increased, the amount of water in Swale available for abstraction has actually decreased. groundwater levels have dropped and the water features on the surface have suffered, and there is less and less water and water features such as ponds around. This is a shame, but I think it's particularly important to remember the historical and archaeological factors that are involved here. So you see clues of this in the landscape that you're also familiar with. You'll see farms known as Pond Farm. You'll see even a village known as Bartlesmere, if I've got the pronunciation right, which was actually a wet area, a mere, originally owned, as it were, by an individual called Bartle. A whole town with water feature named, a whole village with a water feature named after it that we can no longer see. Now, this historical and archaeological these factors are important when we start to think about pond maintenance, because there's an awful lot to think about when you either want to create or maintain an existing pond or water feature, because those features can have incredible historic and archaeological interest. And quite a lot of damage has been done in the past, not necessarily in this area, but damage has been done to historical features by just going in and maintaining ponds which have shown these features, and then these features are damaged by the cleaning up operations required. When you do try and maintain a pond, it's therefore important to get advice from a wide range of people and sources in your area, to look into the community and find out what the history of the pond is, and most importantly, I think, what the community wants to see out of a pond. And here we have a number of really serious issues about everybody's image of what a good pond should look like and why. And some of those visions are mutually incompatible. Doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot have a pond full of ducks and visiting seagulls and coots and things like that, where you go and feed the ducks and throw lots of food into the water and things of that sort. But you have to accept that that is not the only type of pond that you can have, and that a wildlife pond may actually look very different and have a much lower food supply in it and relatively few ducks. Now, I hope in Swale there is room for both those types of pond. Certainly over half a century ago, I have the happiest memory of feeding ducks in my local pond. And I think it's incredibly important that communities should have that opportunity for going to a local pond and having the wildlife in their face, as it were, and feeding the ducks. I always remember my excitement at having fed the mallards on one side of the pond, wandering over to the other side of the lane, finding a mallard's nest in a hollow tree. And I think that was one of the formative things that really set me on being interested in wildlife. But a public pond that has an awful lot of wildfowl on it will undoubtedly attract people feeding it, and it will attract public access. You have to have that, and therefore you start to get all sorts of other issues, ranging from excess nutrient in the water, stirring up of the water as the ducks paddle about. You may get introduction of fish, which in turn could often be carp or other invasive species, and will stir the mud up. These are not the wildlife ponds that the purists on the wildlife side will say are most important. What they are looking for is a pond which is short on wildlife, with as few fish, certainly alien fish, as possible, stirring up the mud face, and native fish such as sticklebacks and minnows and things of that sort in it, and invertebrates will of course get eaten by the fish. Unless you have a clear vision when you are maintaining a pond, you are bound to fall into one of the traps of sort of trying to do something and then deciding that actually you don't like what you've done. I'm absolutely clear that there must be a space for both types of ponds. I would also say, however, that there are quite a lot of issues in going for the cleanest possible pond, which is the most obvious thing. Let's clean it out. Let's remove all the sediment from the base of the pond all at once. Well, there's a couple of issues with that. First of all, you're removing all the wildlife from the pond. And secondly, of course, you're removing all the stored carbon. And here we come across some rather more recently raised issues, which is the value of ponds in a landscape for controlling carbon. Now, this is very much a developing area. It's undoubtedly true that when you create a pond and you start to develop a silt layer in it, then carbon from stored leaves, old bits of wood and things like that will be accumulated within those sediments. Per square meter, ponds are far better at accumulating carbon than woodland or even ancient grassland. But if you start to disturb the pond, you are of course removing that carbon. So we don't want to be doing that across all the ponds in the area. If our maintenance plan is to clean up every single pond in Swale, we'll be doing the wildlife a disservice and the carbon storage a disservice, and probably damaging the architectural and heritage elements as well. So I'm here really to say caution, think, consult, investigate, and most importantly, think what your aims are in that particular situation. So, for example, in a large country park, it may be that you have a front-facing pond, which is fairly bare. This might be where you're going to expect dog walkers to allow their dogs into the water. Then there may be some mallards nesting and things of that sort, and that's going to be fairly close to the path at the front. Perhaps hidden away slightly more at the back, there will be a pond surrounded by perhaps a bit of woodland on one side, perhaps a bit of long vegetation, maybe even bramble on another, which you can access from one point. There are certain design features that you can do to think about health and safety and access and things of that sort. But that's going to be your wildlife pond, which you're going to try and keep dogs out of and not encourage high numbers of wildlife into. So I think I'm going to pause there and try and check my phone as to time and realise that I've been talking for well over 15 minutes. So my apologies for that. One thing I was warned about was that if I could stop talking myself early, then probably move on to the more valuable part of this session, which is to see whether you have any questions and perhaps raise any particular issues that you have with ponds in your local area.
Yeah.
If that's okay,
Yeah.
Chair,
Yeah.
can I leave
Yeah.
it to you to manage, or,
Yeah.
or can I
Is that-
ask
You're
the
welcome.
questions? And could you give me your name and where you're from first?
Yeah, of course.
I'm Brian Clark from Brixton Parish Council. We have a first type on that you just discussed, I think, as you saw it as you came in. So we do have some ducks on it, and we do, in its responsibility with the parish council look after it, and it's one of our biggest areas of work we do, I suppose. There are other places around the village. For example, just opposite the school, there used to be a pond years ago. It's not car park. And a few years ago, there was a lot of flooding around and areas that flooded, and there used to be ponds where what's happened is the water companies have put in underground storage and ponds have disappeared. Is your organisation, I'm aware of that the government's got new agricultural policies. Are you kind of trying to engage with farmers and such like to kind of re-establish some of the ponds that used to be there? Does that have any interest to you?
Thank you. Yes, that's a very interesting question, is how we can do things countrywide. I think, first of all, I would say we're only one organisation interested in ponds as volunteers in our local parishes. And I would also say there's a whole ecosystem of other organisations that we would want to work with and partner up. So Kent Wildlife Trust, for example, have just put in 5 ponds on quite a similar environment just along to the western, it's on Nashenden Down. One of the reasons they're putting those 5 ponds in is to try and encourage wildlife, and in particular turtle doves. That's a very dry environment. I know there are other turtle dove projects in Swale as well. So they have more money and more power to work across Kent as a whole, as our 30 pond wardens, volunteers scattered across Kent. We do not have either the money or the organisational strength to develop a county-wide link with farmers and encourage them. We've worked with Kent Wildlife Trust, we've worked with the RSPB Turtle Dove Project, as we already are in 2 areas of Kent. And of course, we would refer to the countryside partnerships and indeed the rangers appointed by Swale Borough Council, who do such excellent work in Milton Creek Country Park and in Gunpowder Works Country Park. And they have also put ponds in and manage them, which, you know, we've talked to them about informally from time to time. Those are their projects. There are also farming organisations. There's, you know, the Canterbury Farmers Club and so on, which are usually quite amenable to these sort of things. So yes, we try in our own individual parishes to work with our own individual funds, but for a big push across the country, across the county, I would refer to other larger organisations than ourselves. And I know that, to mention another organisation, the Kent Downs area of outstanding national beauty was very keen on setting up a Restore Kent's Ponds project. I should also mention that the countryside partnerships are really quite involved in a specific project to do with Great Crested Newts. These are pilot projects which, rather than saying, here's a development, this pond must be saved for the Great Crested Newts, takes a rather different viewpoint and says that if that pond goes, the developer is allowed to pay for restoration and creation of new ponds in potentially better environments for the Great Crested Newts. And Kentish Stour Countryside Partnership and Medway Valley Countryside Partnership over the last few years have been putting in new ponds, quite often on farmland. And of course, there is funding available for that, which we couldn't tap into. Ultimately comes from the developers. Lots of opportunities. We would see ourselves as advising on the basics and being signposts to sources of funding, organisations, volunteers who can help. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just beginning, so apologies. Yes, so I represent West Downs, which is Romsham, and Traptard. In particular, Romsham's got a network of 3, and we're in the process of 3 ponds, or actually, or two, were actually one, and we divided it. One of the main issues is about road runoff and agricultural runoff, and there's no interceptor. Have you had much success in trying to get either highways or agricultural partners to put something in to prevent the contamination going into a pond system? Because the pond system feeds ultimately
Yes.
down to Tom.
Yeah,
So it's actually quite a high point, and it's quite noticeable. The first pond is absolutely stark and bereft of anything other than the odd duck.
Mm.
You know, they're left predominantly to their own devices, but we're in a process. I say that I obviously chair the parish council, got done with that one, about writing a formal plan for it. So A, can we come to you? And B, yeah, about interceptors.
Certainly, we'd be very glad to talk to you about that. I suppose I'd say we'd probably give you a bias view towards wildlife ponds.
Yeah, that's right.
And, you know, rather like the government taking advice for scientists on COVID, you also have to be aware of a wide range of views as to what you want. For your ponds. But I would mention a really good example of a pond in Oxford, where the parish council has gone straight ahead and upgraded its pond and made absolutely certain that it's subdivided a small area of that pond to act as a nutrient trap. Whenever you have inputs of road runoff, as you quite commonly will have, from roads into ponds, you get a high level of trapped nutrients, heavy metals, and silt. And so the silt tends to accumulate and build up. And if you have a trap area at the inlet area of the pond, then you can use that as a sacrificial area, which you can clean out relatively easily. You plan it so it's where you can access and so on. And try and reduce the nutrient level going into the rest of the ponds. There is one aspect of ponds that actually I haven't mentioned, which can also be relevant, and that's when you are faced with the rather opposite aspect of things, when it's not that you don't have enough water, but then all of a sudden you do have too much water. And I think there was an occasion in Swale May a few years ago when there was an awful lot of rain fell very clearly. And I've just had a look at the KCC report on what to do about that. And apart from clearing gullies under roads and things like that, I think in at least one instance in Doddington, they were looking at something that we call natural flood management. And here you have opportunities for depressions in the ground to be quite small ponds, but also to try and trap water coming downhill. Now, ponds on their own are not going to do a great deal, but natural flood management will involve a very site-specific survey of that area, and can often, for example, talk about putting belts of trees in which increase the infiltration of water rushing over agricultural fields down into the deeper soil, down into if you like silt traps and so on, and even down into the chalk beneath, rather than flowing over the surface. And if I've understood the KCC report correctly, one of the main issues was agricultural land, which could not accept the water penetration as much, you know, agricultural land has problems with, and you don't have the hedges and the copses of trees that would have been useful, and the ponds that would have been useful.
Well, we've got all of those, so.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I don't know whether I've answered your question.
No, we'll come to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think that comes there.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful.
Yes, well, I think we've got a long history with KCC because it's seen to two sets of ponds effectively, and they absolutely weren't very helpful over the last 10 years, so.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Yes. But we'll get there.
Councillor Baldock?
Yeah, when you look at old maps, there were a heck of a lot more ponds. A lot of them were on private land. And over decades, they either dried up or the flow has changed. Given that the value of ponds to wildlife, do you provide help for people who are interested in establishing a pond on their land, even if it's not public land?
Can I define help as advice
Yeah.
rather than muscle
Digging
power?
it up.
With only 30 slightly aging pond wardens scattered across Kent, advice is our big thing. And we like to work with local volunteers, and quite often a parish will, know people who are prepared to put their backs into things, or there may be natural volunteer groups, perhaps even scouts and so on. We're trying to raise the funding to replenish our stocks of waders in order that we can get into ponds and do these sort of things. But yes, we would act as signposts towards all sorts of advice as to creating ponds. It's got to be very specific to the particular situation and to managing ponds. Again, every pond is different as to the advice that we would give. What I would also hope, selfishly, is that more parishes actually encourage people to have pond wardens, even on that limited basis of saying, okay, well, here's some advice, here's some sheets you could look at, and we can try and spread that understanding a bit more. It's very, very important, I think, to try and do ponds right. They can be real headaches for parishes when they go wrong. On the other hand, they can be absolutely fantastic. So on the fantastic side, I would name the pond at Painters Forstall, which is an absolutely great pond, and it is by far the biggest and busiest toad breeding pond in the whole of Kent, to the extent that it has toad patrols in the evenings, people trying to stop the toads being run over as traffic goes along the nearby road. And that's Bennington, about 12 other places across Kent, but not to the same extent. So that's a great pond on private land. There's a management plan about how to manage the vegetation around the pond, which is really important, and to control the nutrient and pollutions going into it. It's probably one of the key factors in pond management as a whole. On the other hand, you have ponds where the vision for the pond is unclear. Nobody really knows whether it's there for the children to feed the ducks and encourage the rats and things of that sort, and whether it's supposed to look nice and clean, or whether it's supposed to be a wildlife pond for great crested newts or toads or whatever. And one of the big problems that then comes into play is invasive species. And ponds, if you start planting them up with plants from other ponds that are contaminated with invasive species, can soon get covered with pygmy weed and all sorts of other things, Himalayan balsam, and bulrushes, of course, can be extremely invasive and need very careful management. And you can soon find the pond loses its function and becomes a headache to the parish council rather than a source of pride. And again, I think knowledge and making the best of the wildlife in the pond, dipping ponds, is one of the key things for community buy-in in those sorts of situations. Invasive species can be so damaging to some ponds that at least some national organisations are saying that pond is so full of invasive species, your best answer would be to fill it in and dig a new one. And that should emphasize the seriousness of the invasive issue.
Do you have many pond wardens in Swale?
No. What more?
How could we help advertise the desire for more pond wardens without you going around to the parish council?
Could I send a flyer out? Would that get distributed?
We have, one of our councils is designated for.
Ah, excellent, yes, yes. A small flyer, something of that sort.
Are there any other questions?
How much are these waders that you need?
They're quite expensive, around 70, 80 quid each. And so, I should say a little bit about health and safety as I'm talking to parishes, but it's not an easy thing to get somebody to go into a pond. We generally advise early autumn for accessing a pond because water levels are lower and it's easier to get in. Do be careful never to allow anybody to go into a pond on their own. There must be full attention paid to what would happen if something went wrong. And believe me, if you fall over in a pond because you trip over a branch or you get stuck in the mud and you are wearing waders, you tend to end up with your waders full of water and waggling about in your very heavy water-filled waders and unable to exit the pond on your own. I've been there.
Yes.
You guys are controlling bulrushes.
Yes, start 20 years ago, getting rid of them.
They're certainly, after you've gone to see, it's only been there 2 years.
Oh, only been there 2 years. Well, there is time. Hopefully they haven't grown too dense. They tend to form a very dense network of rhizomes underneath the water, right down in the mud. And you basically have to get at that. And some people have tried sawing chunks off and pulling them out, things of that sort. It's heavy work, really heavy work. But it's doable if you have the appropriate amount of muscle available. Bulrushes tend not to go into water more than about 2 meters deep. So
Not very deep this one.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, okay. I mean, I would, yes, absolutely. Well, that's absolutely spot on, you know, that is the thing to do. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that once they're there, you either try and manage it at the level it is and not to allow it to spread, or of course, some people would say, well, try and get rid of them all. And let some other plants in. It's your choice.
Did have just one comment on the IM, which is from Rebecca, who's speaking later actually, about getting in contact with you. So we'll pass on your contact details to Brogdale CIC. We've got a contact card, Rebecca, so we can scan that in and send that over to you afterwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, brilliant. If there's no more questions.
Can we allocate funding towards supporting work in the area?
I think we can have a discussion about it, but obviously we need to bring a proposal back to the December meeting, so we can't agree an allocation without a proposal. But we can, it depends on obviously what we can work up that project before the next meeting, and then but when we talk about the funding item 7, we can obviously make sure that we bear that in mind at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone,
Thank you very much for
for listening to it, particularly for those that don't have ponds and don't have a direct interest. Very grateful for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So our next agenda item 6, is the reversal of some of allocation funding from last year. So I'm just going to hand over to Janet just to introduce that report. It's quite straightforward, so
Yes, so this is some funding that was allocated in the year 2020-2021 for 3 brown signs. The officer leading on this did work with Kent County Council to and put in an application for the strongest of these signs, and it was rejected as it didn't meet the criteria, and were strongly advised not to submit further applications, as they likewise would not be successful. On discussion with Councillor Baldock and the lead officer, and also in discussion with the head of finance, the proposal is, or the recommendation is, to reverse that allocation of funding of £1,200 and add it to this year's allocation, and that is allowed, and would increase the allocation for this year to £35,200.
that's pulled up.
Yeah, I think it's real shame that we are in this position. I know that Lynn did try and get something positive from KCC. I think their criteria are unhelpful. Bobbing Church couldn't have a listing because it didn't have a toilet. I don't think the Henger's got a toilet either. I can't see why KCC are being, make it so difficult to get fault for tourism signs like this. I was wondering if we could write a letter expressing our disappointment that we had 3 good projects for signposting that didn't fit their criteria, this is a shame that we're not able to support local tourism like this.
I'm happy to write a letter from the committee, if that's what everyone would be in agreement for, just express. Councillor Hunt?
Is that the reason they've given you? Because there's no toilet?
For the church, that was one of them.
Because just looking, Conway doesn't have a toilet at all. No, but Faversham, there's that stone chapel,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't have a toilet.
hasn't got a toilet, but has got a brown sign.
Mm.
Yeah, brown sign.
Yeah.
So
We just believe their criteria.
they're talking.
Some discrepancy with their decisions, at least. We can highlight that in the letter, can't we? So should we, those 2 things separately, all in agreement to send a letter to them expressing our disappointment? Everyone in agreement with that?
Do you want to propose it, Janet?
Yes, please.
I'll propose so.
Seconder? Councillor Bonny. Okay, and I think everyone was in agreement for that. And then are we in agreement, obviously with the recommendation that money is obviously added to our funding allocation for this year?
So, yes.
Yeah. Everyone in agreement?
Financial.
And do we need a proposer for it?
We can.
Yeah. Do you want to propose?
Yeah.
Seconder? Councillor Hunt. Yeah, and I think we're all in agreement for that one. Brilliant. Okay, so that then moves us to agenda item 7. So we have several different projects that we're going to discuss. The way I think I want to do this is we'll discuss each one kind of as in the order that it's laid out in your agenda. We'll do the youth project first because we have Rebecca online to talk to us about that. So I'll, in a minute, I'll just hand over probably to Councillor Palmer to introduce it and then over to Rebecca. Just a couple of points just before we get to that. I just wanted to highlight to members. So the Constitution states that any amount for which an allocation has not been agreed by the area committee by the end of the financial year will be forfeited and no rollovers will be permitted. So that's what the Constitution has always stated. In particular, what we need to be aware of for this year is any funding allocation agreed by the committee but unspent by the end of each electoral cycle, i.e. May 2023, will also be forfeited. So that's something that we need to note for this year. If the money hasn't been deemed as spent, so it hasn't left the Swale Borough Council account to wherever we're sending it to by May 2023, then there's no possibility to roll that over. So we just need to be aware of that when we're kind of having our discussions with this item. Okay, so first one then in our list is the youth projects. So all of these were things that were requested at the June 2022 meeting, and these proposals have been worked up in the time and obviously brought back to today's meeting from those discussions. So Councillor Palmer, do you want to introduce this one a little bit, and then I'll hand over to Rebecca.
I think members on the committee have always asked about the youth provision, and I think they've always had sort of residents complaining to them, reference antisocial behaviour and other things. And particularly the rural communities, sometimes there's not a lot of activities going on for some of the youth about. And I think this is a good, viable scheme. And what I like about it is that they're actually going to go out and try and engage with the youth in the area to let them know what's on. And I think that's a good thing, rather than just opening up a youth club and say, come along. They're going to actually positively go out and seek to find people and to type it in towards them. Hopefully, the residents will see the impact in that in reduction of antisocial behaviour, or what is perceived to be antisocial behaviour. Perhaps the only thing I would like to know is where it says no about the means. I think the means must be included in some way.
We have had an update, haven't we, from that they can include the means. So
thank you. But I think the report speaks for itself. I think members have raised it for several meetings here, and hopefully we can all agree that later on this evening. Thank you.
Okay, I'll hand over to Rebecca and then we'll come to questions afterwards. So Rebecca.
Hello everybody, really nice to be joining you this evening, and I was actually really fascinated to listen to the article about the ponds, so that was a wonderful addition to my time with you. When I came to the last meeting, you were asking about what could be done for the villages, and I came with Amanda Turner, who's KCC Youth, and she explained that there are certain restrictions on the contract that we have on what we can deliver and where we can deliver to. And the villages, I suppose, were limited in what we were able to provide. And so you asked if we would look at whether we could do some additional work. So I went away and I talked to my youth workers about that. And we have a youth van that goes out at present into a couple of the villages and engages with young people in a sort of a detached process, talking to those who are hanging around on the streets and getting to know them, finding out what they want to do and where they would like to go, and encouraging them with specific dates where we set up activities they can go to, and we're able to pick some of them up and take them if they don't have transport, or if their parents can arrange for them. We meet them there and then we pay for them to go to the cinema or go bowling or get engaged in particular activities. So we thought, well, that's been a successful model and that's been working for the last 6 months. Perhaps we could do something similar with the villages that aren't getting access to youth work, where we could actually go and engage with the young people, ask them what they want, let them know about the activities that are running, where they are, what days, what times, what age groups they are, and what kind of activities are happening, so they're more informed about it. But also then look to see where they want activities and what sort of things they want, so we can be specific to their needs. So we're proposing to do 6 weeks of going out a couple of evenings a week, so 6 hours, and engaging with young people that we meet out and about as we go around in the youth van, and putting some flyers out too, and through your means of advertising as well, through the village leaflets that you have and newsletters, to say where we're going to be. And first of all, we'd go around in the vans and engage with the young people. And then what we want to do is have specific times we can meet them in village hotspots like village halls or community centres, so that we can talk to them and listen to their views and what they want to have. So that's really what we're proposing to do, so that we can then see whether it's viable to set up sort of youth provision in any of the villages, and where we could then direct other young people from the nearby villages to that provision, or whether it's more relevant to the young people to put some sort of transport on that could collect young people on several nights a week to bring them into another provision that's already being provided. So that's what we're looking at the moment. Engage, find out what they want, do this via questionnaires, do this by face-to-face talking, be with them in a sort of a village location, and then identify what resources are going to be required to provide activities for them. So that's what we're looking at.
Brilliant. So Councillor Baldock, I think you had your hand up with your question.
Thank you. I always feel like I'm pushing microphones, please. It's really speaking to a bomb. The programme is for about 6 weeks. Would there be any value in repeating this rather than just doing it as a one-off, but doing it maybe 3 times over the next 12 months? Try and build up a sort of that sort of ongoing engagement. Would that, do you think, have some value?
I do think it would have some value. And one of the things I would say is there are times of year when young people are out on the streets and out and about. And obviously we're going into the autumn now. We've had this amazing summer where it's been really hot and young people have been out and about and haven't wanted to be in the club so much because they wanted to go down to the beach and they want to be outside and doing outdoor activities. So as we go into the autumn, there will be some that are out on the streets, but of course the light's going to be going, the evenings will draw in and we won't have so many young people out and about. So my caution would be, which is kind of doing us out of the opportunity to do this, is that if we do this, we need to be starting relatively soon while there is still light. And yes, it could be a really good idea to then do it again as the evenings open up again and see what the young people want to be doing, because it's going to be the brave at heart that are out and about when the evenings are a little darker, and potentially those that are looking to be perhaps causing some disrespectful behaviour.
I think too often people come and go, and it's that commitment over a period of time builds the trust in what you're trying to do. I was wondering whether or not we could do the September one and then agree one in February and then one again next May. But commit now so that we can get the money paid off beforehand, but it would actually then be a sort of programme that could be built on over the year.
Certainly that's fine by us. That's not an issue for us to do. We have the capacity to deliver that, and we'd be very we'd be very interested in finding out what the youth in the villages want to do, because it's got a twofold purpose for us. First of all, it meets our aims and our ethos of what we're trying to do, which is engage young people. But secondly, as you're all probably aware, KCC are going to be putting out a new tender for the service to provide the next lot of youth in the foreseeable future. So I think that's our contract is up for Swale Youth Consortia at the end of March. We've already had one extension, and so it might be that they'll either extend again or they will be looking to put out a tender document. So for us to know what young people want, we can be more specific and targeted with what we can actually then do when we're putting a bid proposal together, because we'd want to tender again for the activities that we've been running.
Lisa, can I just check with you, would that work in terms of the finance paying out part?
I think so. I think if we contract with them, and there is always a risk, but we have to manage that risk. And if we contract with them, then I think we can do that, and that's not a problem.
Okay.
Brilliant. So it's about getting that contract and payment in place, and we don't have to pay at the beginning. We can pay very, very close to May, and I've seen on another thing that we have had some advice from our deputy 151 officer that in an emergency or we can pay right up to deadline day. So I think the risk management for that is active.
Okay. Yeah, councillor Hunt.
So one of the concerns I had was the evening, getting darker and the achieving being out there. So I think if we can do that, then I think it's a good thing.
Okay.
So if that is a proposal, I'm happy to second it.
Yeah, so councillor Baldock proposed that we basically triple that funding then, so it's for 3 sessions between now and May, seconded by councillor Hunt. Is everyone in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Stephen?
Yeah, quick comment. The thing about the night times, which I was one point about that. Can this operate over the weekends during the day? Because youths will be out and or school holidays. Would that help on the darker months?
Rebecca?
I think I've heard and got the gist of that, but I only heard half of it. So I'm just going to repeat back what I think I've heard, which is, could we do some of the youth work where we're actually doing that out and about engagement and research over weekends and during holiday periods? Was that correct?
Yeah, in the darker, as we're going into the darker months.
The answer to that is yes. I mean, we have youth workers who work days, evenings and weekends, so that they can be doing that at any time. So yes, we're happy to engage, and actually mixing it up is really useful, because there will be different youths that go out in the evenings to those that would go out during the day and at weekends that we'd be able to engage with. So that would be very helpful.
Brilliant. Okay. Councillor Bonny.
Yeah, I suppose it's the audience for these, the youngsters that will be taking it on. I think there's some different dynamics. I understand it's about, giving them something to do so they don't cause trouble. But I think for some of the rural villages, particularly mine, that are cut off from public transport and are wholly reliant on parents or maybe a bike or something like that to get them about, it's actually about isolation and living in a rural community in isolation. So, for instance, Milstead doesn't have a huge youth population. There are a few, but they're not high in number, and their more issue isn't about getting into trouble. It's about social isolation and taking part in activities. So, a comment about that, because they're quite a different dynamic. I suppose if I'm looking at my villages like Bacchard's, I suppose more has a much bigger youth population than those small and geographically isolated village of Milstead.
Okay, again, I think I've heard and got the gist of that, and I'm going to answer with what I hope is the right answer to what you've just asked me, which was about having a different dynamic to the young people in how they would engage. So it wouldn't necessarily be correct to try and set up a youth group because the numbers are low, and what they're looking for is that engagement because they're isolated. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm sometimes only getting every other word. Okay. One of the things that we did during COVID is we had to very rapidly go online, and we set up online youth activities and youth engagement. And we did that across disability, the younger age group, so it was much more fun clubs, and also with the older ones, which was more almost like welfare and engagement with them and connecting them with other young people of a similar age. What we could do is, as we're going out and about, is ask them if they would be interested in doing some online engagement where they're actually making friends and connecting online with other young people from other areas. Or it could be that we could run clubs online, such as sort of Dungeons and Dragons, and where we engage them in a safe environment of meeting other young people that are known to be young people, and we've checked that they are, rather than potentially people posing as young people to engage young people in activities. So we could look at things that are online, but also we can do what I suggested earlier, which was to organise set nights where we could collect young people and take them out of their village environment and into and you know, an established youth group, or into going to the cinema or to go bowling and to meet up with some other young people, so that they're making their own connectors by doing that as well. It just really depends on what the young people want to do. The main body of work will be making those relationships, and it takes time to make relationships and to form trust, and that's what we're going to be doing as the main body.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other questions, Rebecca? Councillor Clark? Sorry, just speak up a little bit louder because it's having trouble picking up, sorry.
Okay. Can you tell me why highway is not mentioned in the project proposals?
It is Highway, yeah. Second line,
Up Church and
up Church and Highway, one evening.
Got gloves on.
Yeah, yeah, no, it definitely was.
As long as it is. thank
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I live in Iwade, so we definitely will be doing youth work in Iwade.
There you go.
And,
I'm nearly going to get here.
and over the summer we had wild outdoors. We had a week's worth of young people running around like hooly monsters, having a great time, building tents, doing cabins, pond dipping, and generally having a great time. Plus we were already doing some outreach in Iwade, but yes, we would definitely be doing Iwade. And we're also very at present aware, because of being on the contextual safeguarding meetings, of some of the incidents and issues that we're having with some of the families in Iwade, two particular ones with the cuckooing and other things that have been going on. So we are very aware of the present need and the present issues. So Iwade would be very much included.
Thank you.
Excellent, good to hear.
Councillor Palmer?
I take it that the Mead is being included, but just put the record, it's worth having the update, so it's.
Yeah.
People online will do.
Yeah, so the Meads is definitely included, isn't it, Rebecca? You checked that they could
It
use
is.
in that area.
Yes, we can go to the Meads as well. That's not an issue.
Councillor Richards?
Yes, like Monique, I don't think that lots of people hanging around with Tunstall, so I wonder if it's possible to have dates, people advertising on when the van might be coming in.
Yeah. I think that's fine, isn't it, Rebecca? We'll make sure that we publish the dates so that they can advertise for places where there's a smaller number, so that they make sure that you can get the engagement with them.
Absolutely, definitely. And we'll do online surveys as well, so we give options for people to engage. So happy to do that.
Yeah. Okay, I think that is all the questions then. So we're increasing the allocation then, if we're going to triple that to 6,930. Do we need the proposer and seconder because it's financial?
I think we have proposal and second.
Yeah.
A show of hands is sufficient.
Yeah, so Councillor Palmer's our proposer. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Clark or Councillor Baldock?
Clark.
Yeah, that's fine. And show of hands of those in support? I think that's unanimous.
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much for coming, Rebecca, and we look forward to working with you soon.
Thank you. And
You're welcome to stay and listen for the rest if you wish, or welcome to your evening.
Thank you. I really appreciate that being able to join by Zoom. We had a very late meeting today, and I just couldn't have got there. But I would come normally in person. I just wanted to say that, and thank you so much. That's very unexpected, and you know, it's been very very informative to have come to the meeting at the beginning too. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye. Okay, so our next item then is the Bredgar and Hartlett Conservation Area Review. So I'll pass over to Councillor Baldock as the proposer for this one to talk about this before we move on. Councillor Baldock?
Yeah, just moving tic tacs out of the way.
You can try and speak as loud as possible so that they can pick you up as well.
Yeah.
Struggling a bit.
Both these conservation area reviews were highlighted last year, possibly the year before, as things that we wanted to do. But you'll read the reservations from the officer about the officer resource. We only have to get these done. We're paying for them to be done. That money has to go out, be paid to the conservationist before the end of April or whatever. So the time pressure is on their part. I'm not convinced that the amount of time that's been taken on some of the previous CAs, conservation area reviews, needed to be as long as it did. And I don't think that should be putting us off going ahead with this and accepting that it may take longer for it to go through the constitutional process. But part of the requirement of getting these consultants is that they are basically supposed to do the work. They are supposed, they are contracted to write up a conservation area review. The way it is then designed and laid out, we do have a design team that do that. So if they're doing their job properly, there shouldn't be a great deal of rewriting or changing it. It goes out to consultation, people comment, it then has to go to a couple of committee meetings, same result effectively. And then there's a choice as to whether or not what is done needs to be amended. We could seek to contract the amendment out to get someone to do the amendment consultation, but I don't think we should be put off going ahead with this because of the anticipated officer resource required. I think it could be managed better.
Thank you, councillor Baldock. Anything you'd like to add? No. Okay. And so we've got a few questions, I think. So, councillor Clark, I think first, and then councillor Richards, and then I'll come down to you. Okay, so councillor Clark, thank you.
Thank you. Really, I would like us to have everything possible again. Makes financial sense looking at the numbers anyway. I'm not sure if we would be able to get people going after this place of make perhaps. It is important, I think, for our conservation area. The document that we have at the moment is very old, and I think it's important for not just Redcar, for all of them as well. It's brought up to date so that it's current and suitable for looking after what is, I believe, a very important part of the borough. So area of the borough. So I like us to see.
Thank you, councillor Richards. Richard, sorry.
I'd just like to say, having gone through a conservation review, the cost that one takes into account, which is not analysed. Parish council told me that twice the same conservation review. There was a lot of time involved. I would like to also say that Peter Belvin, who was the secretary, was excellent. He knew the buildings. Thank you. Would be consistent.
Thank you.
And he was all the time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hunt.
I was going to say, Peter obviously has got a history as well, and knows things better and do things quicker. Looking at these prices, there's a massive difference between the bottom one and the top. If there is an issue with officer time and it's saying about design work, I think if we're looking at some additional funding to maybe, if we are looking at kinds of things, it seems that the best option, we could even add some money onto that. And if there's a need to go out for some external design work, then that's going to be possible. It's even with that second figure of 15,500, with some external design work isn't going to be anywhere, I don't think, near that. So if we were saying about going for that 8,400 and I don't know, making it to 9.5 or 9,400, put an extra 1,000 in there. If there is a need to go for external design work, then that's something that can be done. But I think it's right to go and get it done.
Can we do that, or would we need to propose? Would we have to agree the 8,400 now, and then at December meeting bring back a second proposal for the additional?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Councillor, oh sorry.
I think we do have the design capability in-house.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that just the design work is the issue. I think the issue is whatever's design will need to go back to the planning managers, so Simon, and it's the number he's got on at the moment. And I think the fear of officers is, and so this is just putting it out there to be very blunt, we are time bound with this money, and the fear is that we won't get to the place that we need to get to on time, or something else will give. And Councillor Baldock has said, kind of if everyone does what they're supposed to do, paraphrasing, but it's doable, that's right, but that doesn't take into account an upturn in maybe planning applications, which take the team off doing conservation reviews to commenting on planning applications. So this is done, and I'm not saying that they should be spending their time doing that, but the reality is, and I'm just talking about the realities, they do. And it is just to say, to be very clear, that this, if members want to do this, that's absolutely fine. What I'm saying is that I can't guarantee, or this report is saying that the officers can't guarantee that we will get it done. And I just think members of this committee need to be really aware of that. What we can do is to revisit the other works that we're doing and have discussions with the borough councillors to say, these are the other works we're doing, where do things sit? But the bottom line is there are pressures on staff, and if everything is equal, it should be okay. We don't know if we go to Peterborough, we don't know how long he'd have to wait, because I think he's quite busy. So there are just a number of things that we may have to come back in December and say, actually, Peter couldn't start it until X, Y, and Z time. So that is.
Councillor Bonny?
Thank you. The pain of having first a contractor who couldn't then deliver, that was a painful process for the parishes, for the officers and for the board member. It was an enormous headache. So I think, first of all, we need to ditch that, because they weren't deliverable. We know Peter's delivered before. He has a lot of local knowledge, and so it gives him a massive advantage. In terms of design work, I do believe my understanding of the capacity within the design team, as in layouts of printed material, is there. I hear the concerns about the capacity of particularly the heritage and conservation officers. Did have both officers working on those conservation area reviews, so I suppose it's about managing that in a slick way, because was there a duplication by having two officers working on the same conservation area review? But these absolutely should be done. It is priority of this council to look after its heritage assets, and that includes its conservation areas. And the government is fairly clear that these should be reviewed every 10 years. I mean, the Rutland one had never been reviewed in 50 years. Brodgar's obviously has been done more recently than 1973, but we do need to make sure that these are done on a reasonably 10-year regular cycle. So I would like to proceed. It is in my ward, one of the villages, the others not. However, I do see this as a priority, especially for our villagers.
Councillor Addercut, and then I'll come to Councillor Palmer.
I have an interest to declare because I live in the conservation area of Barnet. As a matter of fact, I very much support the idea that it should go ahead. When this came up, I spoke to a fellow who lives in the village who actually runs an organisation which provides information to listed buildings and deals with heritage issues. And I said to him, is this going ahead? Will you be able to give a hand? And he said, yes, of course. In fact, he said one of my employees, a chap called Peter Bell, and he said, I'm sure he would help you as well. So I say no more, but I hope that councillors feel able to.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock?
Yeah, and when, my first bit is about the extra burden around editing of a picture or map heavy document, so I think that is ish. Also, it talks about other conservation area reviews that have been agreed, but haven't been done yet. But we made it quite clear a year ago, might even have been 2 years ago, lost over time with COVID. But yeah, it was 2, wasn't it? Then we said, yeah, area committees have the opportunity to jump their conservation area reviews up the list if they want to pay for it. This was a way of getting extra work done by getting consultants to do the conservation area reviews. This area committee has committed to several. It is up to other area committees. If they want to commit some of their money to get conservation area reviews done by external consultants, they could do that. They could have done it. They've had 2 years that they could have done it. They have chosen not to. That doesn't, I don't think that should mean that we, because we have taken that opportunity, should be afraid to, do it again.
Councillor Palmer?
I just, I think we're all clearly in support of the proceeding. I like Councillor Hunt's idea of perhaps allocation an extra amount for design at the next meeting, but I would propose that we go for the quote from Peter Bell.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we've got proposal seconder. Is everyone in agreement to move forward with the Peter Bell quote 8,400? Yeah, that was unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Brilliant. So we'll move on to the next one. That's King George V toilet refurbishment. So Councillor Sarah Stephen, I'll hand over to you for this one.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this at the last meeting. Somebody, Councillor Hunt said, have we got any toilets in Weston? Yes, we have. King George's playing field and recreation ground is extremely well used by residents. It has a lovely lodge house, has football pitches, it has tennis courts. It's used by the elderly, it's used by young people, families. We, in our programme of refurbishing playground areas, it was one of the parts that was chosen as well. We have a lovely relationship with First City Morning Blue. But one thing that really lets the park down is the outside toilet. We've done some work on the lodge house itself, but quite personally, and I know there's people in the room who use it, it is absolutely not fit for use. It's old, the interior is old, it's smelly, it's dark. This proposal, I think, is actually quite a fair sum, and I want to go for the whole amount to make it really manageable. Because tiles, if we stick with the tiles, they are hard to keep clean and eventually grouting goes. I think if we're going to do it, we want to do it nicely. So I'm hoping that the committee support this one because it is such a beautiful park. It's used. I've got a message from Wes, who lives in the lodge house, and he was just so over the moon that we've put this proposal forward. And he just says it's an amazing park. And he saw during lockdown how important it was for people in all the walks of life using it to relax and enjoy. And it's just that one bit. I think perhaps Bonnie agrees with me that let's get down. Ideally, we would like a set of more toilets. It's just one toilet that's for all. But it's not an ideal world at the moment financially. But if we can do something like this for the park, I think it really will. It'll look quite nice in the bank for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Baldock and Councillor Bonnie.
Yeah, I thought this was a remarkably good fee or whatever. I wasn't too sure about this White Rock though. I'm not sure what White Rock is, and I do quite like the concept of tiles in toilets. But I was also thinking, we don't have to be plain white. You could actually, if you spent 1,200 instead on getting some nice tiles, you could actually have picture tile, which would be different.
Keep it clean, it's very black inside at the moment, I've never been in there. It's a black room.
You don't want any distractions.
What is it? It's white rock, that sort of knobbly crap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
but it's easy to.
It's easy to
maintain.
clean and
How is it
maintain.
easy to clean? It's knobbly.
Look at the post.
It's white, yeah,
Things
it's
in
white.
Whereas tiles, the gravity and everything.
Yeah, it's
eventually
lovely.
gets bacteria.
Thank you, councillor Baldock. Councillor Bonnie?
Sorry, I got it again.
That's all right. So, well, I used to live in the house next door to the park gates. I don't anymore, so I don't think I have anything dread to declare. But I did see how well used this park is. It's one of the most popular parks. And what was the stable block to the old manor house is now pavilion, etc. The toilets are really well used. In an ideal world, you would have the additional one. I wholly support this amount of money. It actually seems quite reasonable, given where council quotes quite often come out, given our contractual arrangements. I suppose the experience of being a pools trustee, sometimes modern materials, everyone says, oh, they're great. Well, they're great in the first 5 years, but 10, 15 years down the line. And I would say that where they had tiled floors and they were ripped up and a new material was used, let's just say the tiled floors way previously outlasted the old ones. So I'm happy to go for a higher amount. And I'm not sure, yeah, that white rock stuff's horrid, but
Yeah, I don't.
if there could be something else, but they do need to be of a nice standard. I know we've done a toilet refurbishment in the past, which I wasn't very keen on because we didn't sort out flooring. And actually here we have quite a set in, I think the lesson was learned there. But I'm happy to go for the higher amount and put it with officers into officers' hands as to which products are used, and then they use a higher spec of wall covering, because it needs to be long-term durable. We have to rather invest in long-term durability.
Councillor?
Thanks for the information.
Yeah.
Councillor Palmer?
There, I say the same. I'm not too sure what white rock is, what it does that. But whatever it is, needs to be durable. But it's convenient, isn't it? Because it's just carried over when council on the outside, so to go for the higher amount, and that covers that.
Any other comments? Yeah, councillor Richard?
It's not actually in Chancellor, the actual Chancellor. Certainly most of Chancellor Urban will use this park places. There are lots of football teams today there, I bet there is a charge parties. It is a jewel in the crown, this park. I'm sure that we could, the cafe there is quite active, and having a toilet there, I think would help on the other thing that is customers. Active, and now there's a toilet on the should be able to.
Having the five balloon hats on when I was there working, I did notice how many commercial traffic type people, well, the number of vans that came in, work that have used the toilet,
Okay.
which might be one of the reasons it's
Well used, yeah.
okay. Parent-child changing area.
Is there a budget for cleaning?
Yes, that was separate, yeah, that was separate. Okay.
We should be wiping the gravel down here.
Is there any other comments? Shall we? Okay.
I'm happy to move the total amount, with the proviso that somebody mentioned.
Maybe we go back to Martin and just.
Yeah, just see if it's
request.
possible.
Delegated to officers on the
Yeah.
final choice of
That's fine.
surface cover.
Yeah. Okay,
So
so,
it's a bit of a, about this white rock.
post from councillor, I suppose councillor Stephen originally, and second from councillor Baldock. So are we all in agreement then for that 5,054? You see the trade hands, yeah? Yeah, again, unanimous. We've just had a message from from Joe online saying it's been really hard to hear pretty much from after Councillor Palmer or Councillor Clark backwards. So what we'll do, if anyone wants to speak now, kind of like on that back row, if we can maybe ask you to come and sit on the chair here just so that we can pick it up on the air. Sorry, making you move. Or shout really loud, yeah, but see if we can just get the audio a bit better for anyone listening at home. Okay, our final then proposal, I think was, so I wasn't at the June meeting, but I think it was originally mentioned by Councillor Horton about the donation to a food bank. So we've taken that away and had a look at where that would be, what food bank would probably be the most applicable for the Western area. And Swale Food Bank, which is part of the Trussell Trust network, seems to be the most appropriate one for our residents. So you can see the details in the project proposal about what they're already delivering. With the current economic situation that, you know, that families are going into, and the cost of living crisis and energy prices, etc., the demand on the food banks is inevitably going to be quite extreme this Christmas and over the winter period. So I think any support that we can give to try and to lessen that and to aid our residents, obviously would want to do. I've done some maths as we've been going. So from the 3 that we've already agreed, so our youth project, the King George's toilets and the conservation area review, that comes to 20,484. Obviously we started with 35,200, so we've got left 14,716, and I was going to propose that we give a donation, say 10,000, which would leave us some money left for our December meeting if any other project proposals come forward. But I think that's a substantial amount which can help a lot of people over the next difficult period that we're all going to be facing. So that's my initial ideas, and obviously any comments from members. So we'll start over this side. So we do Councillor Baldock, Bonnie, and then Councillor Hunt, and then we'll see what else we have.
Thanks, Joe. I'm not sure how many people, if they're needing food banks, they're going to be able to get easily to some of these locations, especially places, you know, like our furthest out. Getting into Sittingbourne. They say in certain circumstances it may be able to deliver food parcels to residents' homes, their mobility or health issues. I would like us to try and get this donation so that they can deliver food banks out more to people, so it provides a great facility for them to get their delivery out to people.
Yeah, we can definitely go back to them, can't we, and see what we can say with this funding. This is something we'd like you to look into investing in and what they can deliver. So we can definitely look into that. Councillor Bonnie?
Yes, so I have the same concerns about mobility of rural residents in order to access this, but in addition, I don't know if anyone's tried to buy heating oil recently, particularly in the rural villages, and I was talking to a resident who was saying, because the minimum order is 500 litres, they just don't have, it's now £1 a litre by the time you've factored in, you know, 5% VAT on heating oil. So, you know, pretty much since where previous oil prices are, they can't even afford the minimum delivery. So whilst on one hand I'm worried about what they're actually eating, the other thing is that I'm really concerned about where they're going with their energy, because although electric prices are going up, the main issue is the ability to access oil because of the cost just to buy the minimum amounts. So I absolutely wholeheartedly support the food bank and giving a substantial donation, because I think it's quite frankly terrifying what is going to possibly happen this winter, especially in our rural communities. And given that we may end up with no rural bus services, those that would have previously used them are going to have an additional cost of using the Kent carrier. So they've got it triple whammy along the transportation issues. So I'd like that we could look at something or how that might be dealt with elsewhere within the council.
Thank you, councillor Hunt.
Yeah.
Mine was a similar thing, this was this location, and the fact that we've come up with one food bank. There's a number of food banks that are working across the area. Swale Food Bank, we have done a lot for them in the past as well. I think if we look at the funding that we've given, we've been quite a lot over the last few years. And I'd rather see other food banks in the area actually getting some funding. Really, that's going to help to get the money out. The other concern that I've got is not wanting to take it away from other areas, but we are a Western area and we want to make sure that the money is spent within the Western area and that it's our residents in our parishes and wards that are actually going to benefit from it. If we say to one food bank that we're going to give them 10,000, that can then go out to the whole of the borough, wherever they're working. So I completely agree to that 10,000, but I'd rather a bit more work's done on where it goes and make sure it gets the right resident.
Which other food banks would you, because when we looked, we were trying to find any that, because I thought there was one in Upchurch, but they work within this, don't they?
Then it's the People Trust Network.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the one I'd heard of that was actually in Upchurch and Western. There's the bus shelter that I know that I've got residents that work there and
Yeah.
help out. So again, they do work.
Potentially
There is others there.
splitting with that. So,
Needs to be looked at.
Councillor Palmer.
I mean, some did crop up during COVID in Upchurch. There was a group, a collection of food delivered locally to Upchurch, but there is someone who collects at the bus shelter on St Mary's Journey, and they take it to the town and give it to the local food bank. However, perhaps the thing we should be thinking about is warm banks. And it's something that we are, or other areas have looked at, and I've had a word with officers of Swale, where they feel, and it might be a village hall, where people come in for 2 or 3 hours, they can get a warm meal, and they can warm up and get other issues dealt with. Maybe something like that might be supported, where it would be in the village hall, vulnerable people can come in and have a meal. But there are other schemes that are setting up, and they just call it warm banks because, again, there are, as any scheme, you bring somebody out of a cold house, give them a warm meal, keep them warm for a couple of hours, then send them back home to a warm house. That could be even worse. There are other schemes that are maybe setting up locally.
So it's really a case of obviously that if they're not in, they're not set up at the moment, we can't allocate anything towards them. So,
but it goes on to what Councillor Hunt said.
Do we?
I would, during COVID, you had deliveries being made around Sydney by West Community Centre and Fellowship.
Diversity House.
Diversity House. Got deliveries out to people.
Yeah.
And I'm sure probably the food banks do it. How do they get the deliveries out to the vulnerable people in the rural community?
I think, yeah, it's definitely something we can talk to. Well, I suppose the 2 food banks, isn't there? Because there's Swale Food Bank and then Buffer Shelter.
Yeah,
So maybe the other one.
Don't have the detail. I mean, Charlotte has some main details of that, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
So, yeah, sorry.
What I'm hearing members saying is they are supportive of the idea of money going to a food bank, but what you want is a way of the people of the Western Area Committee to be beneficiaries of that. And whilst you understand that everyone has problems, this money has to be for that. That money can be given with the proviso that officers have to, it is on condition that officers are able to devise a plan with the food bank to get food delivered, if not to individual people, then to work with parish councils to identify, or village halls to identify if a drop-off place can be given or something to ensure that the people of the Western area are the beneficiaries. And I think that we can, I don't know that the food banks might say, no, we're not having that. It's either a donation or nothing.
Yeah.
In which case we can come back to the next area committee and you may still decide then to do a donation, but you've still got the time then. But does that sound what
was better for what we're getting to? Councillor Bonny?
Yeah, so that's exactly, I think, where we're coming from. And I think in order to access a food bank, they need effectively a voucher system or a referral system. They should, I would hope, that that's something that they can keep tabs on. The thing in the fuel bank here that it talks about is who pay for gas and electricity. It completely omits oil.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest issue because, you know, they need to have access to that. So we want to say, can you broaden that and give some ability or scope to purchase oil? I don't know.
There was.
Or to have drums delivered if it's not a tanker.
So there is a charity. It was either on you or yours, and you and yours or Country Bar, can't remember which one. That does exactly that for the simple reason there is no price cap on oil. Oil is going up. People can't afford the minimum delivery.
Yes.
So this charity gets the minimum delivery or gets a large delivery and then goes round and does smaller deliveries. I have a feeling it was in Lincolnshire, but what I'd suggest is we still have money left over. We can look at that to see there may not be anything in this area at all, but we can have a look with the potential of putting in a bid for next time meeting.
Yeah, we can at least start a discussion with the.
We'll do that work for next.
That's good.
Councillor Palmer and then Councillor Stephen.
I was going to say, maybe it's worth having a word with the second bus. How frequent that is used, if it's used every day. But they go around all their communities.
We can poach it, you mean?
Sorry?
See if we can poach it.
Cross out the word Sheffield.
Yes. Councillor Stevens.
We're talking about different kinds of fuel, and I used to live in High Street Valley, and we weren't on gas mains. Colour gas is another issue, and it was extremely expensive when I had a house run on colour gas, so God knows what it's like now. So that is another fuel that we can consider.
So are we in principle then happy that if we amend this a little bit, so we have a conversation with Rail Food Bank and the bus shelter as our two main ones really for this area, and say potentially 5,000 each for both of those, but we want officers to work with them to show that that's a guarantee that it is our areas that will be a benefit of that, and that's the condition of the funding. Are we happy with that? Councillor Stevens?
Saying that it's a voucher system. Obviously, those that are indeed will apply for a voucher. Sure, you'll know by that means where the food is required, in what areas. And we could base our decision on the amount of vouchers in the Western area, maybe. But then it might be more, it might be less. So we're in a situation that we'll have more money over.
I suppose if we give both, if they agree and they have 5,000 each, then they can use that until that money's spent, can't they? So it can go over however long
Right.
it needs to.
Depends on how many vouchers are being used.
So it might go quickly.
It might not.
Yeah,
So
I don't think we've got control of
We
that.
could be giving money to a food bank that's got no one from the Western area with vouchers. But we could find this out if people are applying for vouchers.
That can be the discussion that officers have.
Yeah.
To say, if you've got people that aren't having vouchers, I would be saying to the food bank, why? Because the Western area isn't somehow richer than the rest of Swale. There will be people in the Western area that have that. So there will be a question, if you've got nobody from the Western area, what are we doing to make sure the people in the Western area who need it are accessing it? And there is that issue of if it's only in Sittingbourne and people are in the rural areas, then actually, do they know about it? Do they feel it's for them? So that these are the conversations we can have with the food bank. We won't give any money unless there are guarantees of it going to your people.
Yeah.
And if the worst case scenario is we come back in December and we say they said no, or they said there's nobody, and then, you know, that's, that won't cost you anything.
Could we buy 10,000 of these pound bottles and flog them off at 110?
No, no.
We would
No.
be inflation proofing.
Enough. Thank you, councillor Baldock. Right.
Well, good income stream.
So are we then in agreement that we'll allocate 10,000, we'll go away and do that extra work, and obviously we'll get an update report in December with regards to that? Yeah? Yeah, all agreed?
And that's with the
Yeah.
food bank.
And we can discuss the fuel bit in one of the items. But yeah. Oh, I'll propose, that's all got something. There we go. Okay, I think that was all of the funding items. So if we move on to agenda item 8, so matters arising. You've all had seen the report, the kind of updates. I'll just go through briefly kind of any bits, and then if there's anything extra, then we can obviously add that in as we get to them. So the youth provision we've already covered earlier in the meeting. So obviously we're moving forward with that, with the funding allocation we've agreed today. Number 2 was the Bregler and Hartlett Conservation Area Review, and again, sorry.
You got on number 1.
Yeah.
You've got the 106 issues.
Oh, update on the 106 issue. Do we have any update on that? I think you would talk about that.
I've had inquiry about this. I've had some of the feedback from some of the 106 money is gone. I'm still pushing for further detail because not all of it's on there. For example, the Eclipse Estate in Newington. The Eclipse Estate.
What you call what's in place?
Yeah. It's by Eclipse, wasn't it? Enterprise. I don't know anyone. That isn't on there, so it's not a complete list. I'm still waiting for a complete list of where the 106 money has gone. I chase it regularly. I hope I won't have to chase it.
So hopefully maybe an update for the next meeting. Okay, so we'll leave that one on there. Obviously, Bregler and Hartlett Conservation Reviews we've talked about today. That's been agreed. Other heritage issues. So hopefully you've seen Appendix 1 and quickly find it as well. That was just an update on where we are. So the Robinsham Church Street Conservation Area Review. So that's the appraisal document being finalised and includes changes made as a result of the public consultation and agreement for adoption by Cabinet. Document is now being published on the Swale Borough Council website and is subject to the 21-day notification period. The Robinsham Green Conservation Review again has been finalised to incorporate the proposed additional boundary changes post the public consultation agreed with the Cabinet. At Cabinet, it was also agreed that another public consultation of 3 weeks should be held for the finalised document. That's proposed to commence mid-September 2022. Has started. There we go. Even more update. Milstead, again, the document has been finalised and includes the changes after the consultation and agreement and adopted by Cabinet. The document is in the process of being published on the council website and is subject to the 21-day notification period. And then for Tunstall, again finalised and changes made as a result of the consultation and the agreement for adoption by Cabinet, and again published, in the process of being published, and will be subject to the 21-day notification period. So that's our update with regards to those. Changing places toilets, sorry. So the funding has been confirmed for 3 locations. Swallows will be undertaken first in 2022-2023, followed by Sheerness and then Healthy Living Centre in 2023-2024. So the officers, Swale Borough Council officers have undertaken the prerequisite training, a meeting to be confirmed with Serco/SCL. to confirm details and requirements of project design. So that's the update we have there. The charging of electric cars at home where there's no driveway. But no, is there anything else to add to what's already there, Melissa? No. So you haven't really got any further with that one at the moment.
Chair,
Yes, Councillor Baldock.
Woodford. I think that changing place of toilet and the charging of electric cars, have I brought up at this area committee? I don't think they need to come back on updates in future, because it's something that would affect the whole borough. So I think we can take them off, they were raised, we've looked at them, but the feedback, you know, on EVs and that, would go to the whole borough rather than.
That's fine. I think so raised by the Bobbin representative. Obviously, that's why they're on our kind of items. But yeah, I think we've answered it as far as we can do now. So moving forward, we can remove those. I think. Obviously, our conservation issues, including ponds. So obviously, we had David in this evening, and it might be that from obviously from that talk that we had, that a funding proposal may be worked up and brought back to the December meeting, depending on whether that was something that members wanted to or any particular member wanted to move forward with. So if it is something that you're wanting to look into and move forward with, obviously we've got David's contact numbers, and Janet will work to build up that proposal for the next meeting if that's something you wanted to do. So just get in touch with Janet about that. The Rose Hill and Meads Woodland Management and Work Plans. Councillor Baldock, is there anything you want to add for the Rose Hill Woods?
Well, it's set up at a monthly meeting now. Got some public events. Come and listen to birds and John Big Little up. So we need to make sure both groups get their £1,000.
Yeah, we were going to mention that.
I think we're in a position to apply for ours soon. We've got the bank account.
Yeah, just need to get the details to Janet.
And then do you just want an annual update from us? Rather than monthly one? Or quarterly?
Yeah, we can do. Sure. What members prefer? Yearly? Quarterly?
Annual.
Annual. Happy with annual updates?
Yes.
There we go. There you go. So we can move to that then. Councillor Hunt, is it similar for your one?
Yeah, it's slightly behind, but it's a meeting set up 27th of September. We've managed to do it for where we get a constitution mixed position. We've got eight members of the involved. One has shown that he's happy to take on a position, so we'll be chair. No.
Was it Peter?
And so yeah, hopefully they'll then take it forward. What I'm proposing with them, I don't know how Mike's done it with Rose Hill, but I would put down in the constitution as a member of Borough Council on the committee as a thing. So anyone going forward, there will be somebody there from the Borough Council.
It sounds like it won't be a problem, but we just need to, it's just to note, isn't it, that money needs to be transferred before May 2023, otherwise it will be lost. So you can just get the details to Janet as soon as you can, the bank account, etc., and then we can get that done.
I wonder, what do we have? They're asking what do they, but they're proposing to get receipts for 10 bird boxes and 2 bat boxes. I'm thinking, God, this is going to take a while. So I'd really like to know how we could just get the money transferred over without having to put every item in.
I think the easiest way is to do it in a similar way as if an organisation that has made a bid. I'll send them an acceptance letter, basically saying that we are awarding them that £1,079. They then complete the acceptance letter with the bank details, return it to me, and I'll arrange with finance to get the funds transferred.
Brilliant.
And then our last update was the walking and cycling project, and there's a workshop that's been arranged for the 15th of September at 2 p.m. in the second floor of conference room at Swale House. So that's hopefully members and parish councillors that would like to attend as well. Welcome to attend that. And if you need any extra details, obviously if you contact Janet, she'll be able to give you any extra details for that. Yes.
I have a matter. it comes up with the heading matters arising from previous meetings. or something. It's not my job.
So not one of those points?
No, it's a matter for clarification.
Okay.
I attended the Morgan meeting on the 1st of September. Because I remember that when we were talking about it, we were talking about more emphasis on rural areas. And it's been very pleasing tonight to four councillors referred to that. But looking at minute 2.6 in September, it said with regard to point 2, in terms of variance, each member will receive an identical amount of specific funding established with each annual council budget to be allocated to projects, consultation and agreement with the area committee at large, 4K each, and 40K in total, as there are 10 members representing the 6 wards covered by the area committee. How does that work in fact? The first meeting, 2 amounts of 5,000 were to specific areas, and I remember a minute saying that each of the 10 councillors would contribute 1,350 or something. But that seems to have been abandoned.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, because I don't have any idea.
This was the perfect way that it was set up, and I thought it should be run. Everybody else thought it was far too complicated, and in the middle of a vote on one meeting, took it out of my hands and proposed that they just pay for everything that had been suggested on a pro rata basis, and that is how we've done it ever since.
There we go.
I'd
Okay.
like to move back to the old way, I'm sure.
No, this is.
Secretary one.
No, that's okay. Okay, agenda item 9, public forum. So I don't think we have anyone from online that I can see. Is there anything you'd like to ask? No? Okay.
You've got none of the public.
Oh, sorry. Hello.
I'm a bit new to lots of things. Don't know what the committee is or the county. I'm a Brecon resident. And there are lots of councils. Doing collection. The issue that is affecting me is the situation with the funding for the buses, for village buses. And I understand it's probably not entirely in your remit, because it's Kent Council. But but Mike suggested that I raised it anyway. I think there's a variety of issues that come to my experience. Because I paid my bus ticket, I use the bus regularly once a week, and would continue to use it more. So you can't run a bus company based on online usage. What I do not understand is why not more people use bus. And I do understand that it's a kind of a lifestyle choice, if you like. I don't have a car, so that's how I get around. Also, I have been living in an urban environment with excellent bus citizens, which I use quite a lot. So I'm used to that. But what it seems here is with the free, essentially free parking at supermarkets, but generally people don't, there's no, if you've got a car, there's no disincentive to use it to go into town. But what I'm unhappy about is that I'm I'm just gonna, because I'm kind of like going off to coffee, I haven't really talked through. What I'm really unhappy about is the number of cars on the road. That it is, should be unnecessary. Like people picking up their kids from school particularly. I used to live many years ago in the village, went to school here, and I went to secondary school in Sittingbourne. And at that time, all the kids had free bus passes. We had a large bus, which was packed with school kids. I don't get, in the modern era, when are we worried about climate change in rural communities or not? It basically boils down to that. It's like, what the crap? It's like, get people back using buses. Normalise the use of buses. Because the reality is, you take away the bus service now. For me, that means I'm mobile. I can walk into town. It takes an hour to walk into town. I can take my trolley into town and I can bring my shopping bag. However, I might be able to walk quite comfortably through the fields on footpaths to get there. But with my trolley, I'm going to have to use the roads. That is, and they are incredibly dangerous, especially in bad weather. In bad weather, should I really be even attempting what's an hour's walk there, an hour's walk back? If I couldn't do that, then I'm really stuck. The taxis would work out really expensive to be doing that, going in and going out. And are we in a cost of living crisis or are we not? It's kind of like, it feels that people in rural communities are not being encouraged for, if you like, communal, to use communal resources. And you're taking away the communal resources without trying to encourage people to actually use them. And just basically, you're leaving us high and dry. And it's just, are we in 2022 or are we in 1996?
I think obviously there's there's a few different issues there. I think in terms of the buses are KCC. So I think we have Councillor Baldock here, who's a KCC councillor. We also have Councillor Lehman, who's listening in virtually as well. So I think both of them can take that up from a Western area point of view. I know that you've both obviously been arguing for against those cuts anyway, but obviously we can still further just try and take that part up on our behalf. I think from our point of view, in terms of what we can do as a borough council to try and encourage, is a bit of a catch-22, because if there's no bus routes available, we can't really encourage people to use them. So I think we're in a bit of a difficult situation as a Swale Borough Council, but I'm sure there's something we can look at with our comms team, potentially at maybe encouraging some more, some more promotion around greener modes of transport and things like that potentially. So yeah, something like that.
You are responsible for Western Swale, which is mostly rural. So, although I'm the one shouting my mouth off here, there are an awful lot of people who are affected and potentially affected. And it just seems ridiculous not to have some kind of a view of how these issues are going to be resolved, the environment issues and the transport issues.
Come over to Councillor Baldock and then Councillor Bonney.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's important to actually hear just how these cuts impact on people. Because when, myself and Rich raised this at County Hall, and we said, there are people who can't. We get this, 90% of people have cars and, they can use them. And it was just this regurgitation of how really nobody was going to be affected. And I think it's important what we do here, the actual impact it has on people. But without a bus, that you've got to walk an hour across fields and then come back even longer with a trolley. It's useful when we go back and feed back. Say, no, this is real. This is having a significant impact. A lot of our rural communities have people who are going to be affected by this. And then it's social isolation as well. People aren't able to meet up and go to places. And that will have an impact on mental health. It will have an impact on all other sorts of budgets, which aren't being factored in by KCC by these cuts. So whilst we can't say, well, I keep saying we should look at it, we can't set up a bus service very easily. We get consulted sometimes on things that happen. We need to be able to feed in. You've cut these bus services. It's going to have an impact on our budget. It's going to have an impact on our residents. It's like a cut on support for homeless. Yes, it might say one county council some money, but the impact it's had on the homeless and on our budget is quite big, which means that we might have to make a cut somewhere else. So it is important that we say, when they come up with policies that are so counterintuitive, counterproductive and harmful, that we feed back and say, these are the impacts you're having. And this is also going to be, this is the impacts that it's going to have on people in other areas, not just getting the bus, but on mental health and loneliness. And somebody's got to pay for that as well. I think it's good to do it.
Councillor Bonny?
Yeah, I quite agree. And I think it's fair that the residents bring this up here, because I'm absolutely flabbergasted that effectively almost all my villages in my ward will end up with either no bus service or a totally scaled back one. Roblesham will have none, Milstead has currently none, and Bredfield is going to have effectively no service at all. And what needs to be made clear, as I was alluding to earlier when we were talking about cost of living crisis, is that you may have a bus pass, but when it comes to using the Kent Carrier, which is supposed to be the alternative, it's going to cost you £3 a go. So currently you're paying nothing for your journey, and suddenly you're going to be faced with every time you want to use a bus, it's £3. So you're already facing increased costs across all your utilities, be it even oil as well as gas and electric, food prices, plus all the other things, and now your transport, so your ability to get transport is becoming smaller and smaller. In fact, there'll be no opportunity to take public transport. And my biggest bugbear is that when we had the opportunity under planning games, section 106, I was party with KCC officers to have a discussion. This is about Kent Science Park currently having no bus service. And that to make their development sustainable, it required a bus service. So I specifically said to the officers, we have a bus service that runs to Rodmersham, Tunstall and Bredgar at what I call, quite frankly, ridiculous times of day. They're no good for school children, they're no good for commuters, and for those that need to get to hospital at certain points, they can't use that bus service. Can we not use that money to make that service viable and it serve the science park? And I was flatly turned down by KCC. And I need to say this in the public forum because we have to show that KCC have completely foregone an opportunity to make what is a subsidised bus service potentially viable. It would have served the community to a greater benefit. All they wanted to do was to add on to a commercial service, a short edition, so it cost the least amount of money, but had the least amount of impact for the wider community. And actually the harm from that development has an impact on the rural community. So that's that piece said. And I hope that's minuted clearly. But the critical thing here is that our rural services, particularly our bus services, are for the benefit of the rural community. The timetabling of those services means that they aren't ever going to be sustainable. Because the one in Romsham runs at 10 in the morning and finishes at 2 in the afternoon. That is no good to man nor beast. It's no good to anyone who works. It's no good to a child. The only people that use that are the retired or those that have the time, if they have a 4-hour window, to use it. I have to say a couple of my guests, my cottages did from Germany, were adamant they were going to use public transport, and with their cases got on it this summer, which is a first in 12 years of operation. But it shows that there is a lack of willingness on KCC to even look at the bus routes to make them viable. And I think this committee should write a letter to KCC to say that the bus cuts that they're proposing will have a fundamental and negative impact on our rural communities, and that they should fully assess the bus times, if they are to continue in them in the future, with a view to running them at sensible times of day that can be used across the community. Yeah, that's cool with the cameras. Anyway, rant over.
That's okay. I think, again, that's something happy to do. So is that a proposal from you that we will write that? Seconder?
Second.
Yeah. Okay, so second from various members. Yeah, so that's something we can put together. So any other comments kind of on that area before we move on? Okay, all right then. Agenda item 10. So this is for members and parish councillors, if there's anything that they would like to raise in particular.
Done it.
We've had it from the too late, okay. Agenda item 11. I don't believe we have any matters referred from service committees, do we? So that one's fine. And then agenda item 12, if there's anything that we would like to refer, but I don't think, again, there's anything at present. We're referring to service committees.
Yeah, we should refer lack of bus services to the policy
And
and transport working group.
Yeah. Copy them into our letter to BCC potentially as well, so we can add that onto there. Okay. That then just brings us on to the date of the next meeting. As we know, there's a couple of councillors that couldn't join us tonight because it clashed with Upchurch's parish council. So what we'd like to do is, so our next date is meant to be Thursday, the 1st of December. I'm apologising in advance for Paul for this one. So we, if possible, would like to move that and have a discussion with the Sittingbourne Area Committee to see if they'd be happy to swap dates, which would mean that we'd move ours to Tuesday the 13th of December. Has anyone got, Paul, anyone got any objections to that? Councillor Palmer?
I'll put that down as a county.
That's what she said.
Yeah, it's Sittingbourne Area Committee.
No, it's
On that
Friday,
day.
committee of Calc, councils.
We won't change that, I can tell you that.
So that might not work
It's
then.
been really difficult to try and get a day this time.
Okay.
13th of December we've got that.
Yeah.
Okay, you might have escaped, Paul.
Oh, very nice birthday cake.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll see if there's any other options. It might be that we have to leave it as it is then for that one, and we'll have a look at the others.
2 dates were viable.
Okay.
So.
All right then, we'll probably have to leave that as it is.
What is the
Thursday, the 1st of December. And I'm not sure where that one is going to be yet, are we?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Will that clash with Upchurch again?
It will do, but there's no other option to move it if counts, or if that's on the 13th. Unless you can come up with anything.
Friday, isn't it?
No.
No.
Yeah.
I like our chair.
Well, if that's the case, then we are finished. I've been meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everybody.